New York Giants fans, who has it better than you? Nobody. And with that, the John Harbaugh era starts in New York with the Giants. Now the question is, what's it going to look like? I'm Coach Gene Clemons, and I have a giant issue. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of A Giant Issue. I am Coach Gene Clemons. New York Giants on that side. That's where you get all your New York Giants news and information from. Make sure you go over there, check out everything that I'm dropping. I'll have my good, great, and ugly series coming soon, looking at all of the 2025 draft class. You want to go over to my page, Coach Gene Clemons, and check out the video breakdowns that I'm going to do over there. Make sure you check out the articles that I'll have on the New York Giants on their side. You definitely want to check that out. You definitely don't want to miss those video breakdowns, by the way. I'm working on it, trying to make sure I can do it and not get flagged because, that's important. But want to start getting back into those as we get into the summertime. You'll probably see a lot more of those from me over there on my page, Coach Gene Clemons. Go subscribe if you haven't. And make sure you subscribe right here at the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel. We are close. We're very close, right? Very, very close. We are, as of this exact moment when I'm recording this, we are at 2,905 subscribers. So we're inching closer to 3,000, but let's just get it done before we get to the Super Bowl, right? Let's get it done before we get to the Super Bowl. Go ahead and hit that 3,000 before we get to the Super Bowl, 4,000 in the summertime sometime, 5,000 before we get to the 2026 season. I'm manifesting it. At some point, I'll make one of these goals that I put up. I keep putting up goals. It keeps taking longer, but we're here for the long haul. So check me out at A Giant Issue. Make sure you check out Paul Latino and the Big Blue Breakdown. As always, we appreciate it. You got your guy, right? Let's start there. You've got your guy. Everybody wanted Harbaugh when Harbaugh became available. First, everybody wanted Stefanski when Stefanski became available. Then everybody wanted Harbaugh when Harbaugh became available. The interesting part about Harbaugh is you have to ask yourself some questions that might make you wonder if it was a great hire, right? So let's just get those quickly out of the way, because I want to spend most of this time talking about what it looks like going ahead. We know that John Harbaugh is a great leader of men, right? He's proven to be somebody that is well respected, that people listen to, that is accountable, and for the most part, I believe, holds people accountable. So why did it end in Baltimore? In my opinion, it ended in Baltimore because I think that the higher ups looked around and went, does it ever get any better than this with him in charge? Maybe this is as high as he's able to take this iteration of the team. What do I mean? Here's the interesting part, right? Nobody seems to remember this, but John Harbaugh was on his way to being fired with the Ravens years ago. Years ago, he was going to get fired with the Ravens because they had decided, hey, one more year of Joe Flacco, right? One more year of Joe Flacco. We're going to like go out with Joe Flacco here, and we'll kind of end and make our bones about it after that. But We're going to go with Joe Flacco. This, if you don't know, I'm talking about the 2018 season with Baltimore. And this season is after this 2018 season, after the Baltimore Ravens, who had last won the Super Bowl in 2012, right? So they had given John Harbaugh this latitude after they won the Super Bowl in 2012, which was his fifth year at the helm, right? His fifth year at the helm. They had all winning records up until that point. They won the Super Bowl, and then a lot of those pieces retired. But the person that didn't retire was Joe Flacco. He was still there, still getting money, still getting paid. They went 8-8, 10-6, where they made it to the playoffs, lost in the divisional round. Then they had 3 straight seasons where they did not make the playoffs. Only one of those seasons was a winning season. That was 2017 when they were 9-7. So 2018, in 2018, the talk was, hey, John Harbaugh is on an extremely hot seat. If it doesn't go well for him this season, they're probably going to be looking for a new head coach. Not because he can't coach, but because maybe the time is up, right? Maybe the milk's gone bad. And it's just time to move on. So they come out that season and they start decently, right? They're 3-1. They lose in overtime. They're 4-2. They win. They're 5-2, and then they lose. They lose 3 straight. 4-2. They were 3-2. They're 3-1. They lost in overtime. They were 3-2. They won. They were 4-2. Then they lose 3 straight. And now going into the bye week, they are 4-5. And it doesn't look good for them, right? It doesn't look good for them. They're 4-5. They've got some good teams that are in front of them to play. And everybody in their brain, they're saying, this is it for John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh does what seemed to be what he should have done at the beginning of the season. He starts Lamar Jackson. They finished that season 7-1. They win 10 games. They go to the playoffs, right? They lose in the first round of the playoffs, but they go to the playoffs, and that is what saves John Harbaugh's job that season, 2018. From there, with Lamar Jackson as the quarterback, they go 14-2, 11-5, 8-9. That's the year that he was injured a whole bunch, right? 10-7, 13-4, 12-5, and then this season, 8-9. What if 13-4 and 14-2? What if that is just the maximum of what John Harbaugh could do with that team? And so it was time to move on. Why? Because what does John Harbaugh bring to the table other than being a leader of men? Does he bring offensive innovation? Nope. Does he bring defensive innovation? Nope. Did you know that John Harbaugh spent the majority of his coaching career not as like an offensive or defensive specialist, right? But as a special teams coach? Like, that is really what he made his bones about. You don't believe me? Okay, watch this. Full coaching history. He started at 22 as the Western Michigan running backs and outside linebackers coach, right? That was in 85. That's back when you still had people working on both sides of the ball. But if he's working on both sides of the ball, that means he's not really, you get what I'm saying? 3 years later, he went to Morehead State and he became the special teams coach. From 1988, right, until 1997, he was a special teams coordinator in college. mostly at Cincinnati. He spent 1 year at Indiana. He was 35 at that time, by the way. That's 1997. Before he went to the NFL and became the special teams coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. He held that job from 1998 until 2006. And in 2007, at 45 years old, so not a spring chicken, right? At 45 years old, the Philadelphia Eagles elevated him to the defensive backs coach. They did so because they wanted to show that he had some type of acumen on the offensive or defensive side to better put him in position to get a head coaching job. This isn't me just making this up. This is what we heard, right? He spent 1 year there. It was the worst defensive backfield in almost all of football that year. It was a disaster in the defensive backfield that season. That's not me making it up. You guys who are Giants fans, you can attest to how bad the defensive backfield was in Philadelphia in 2007. In 2008, he got the head coaching job with the Ravens. He inherited a Baltimore Ravens team that was already good. Right? He inherited at that time a Baltimore Ravens team in 2008 that was already good. Right? They had already had a ton of success. They had already had a lot of success. And in that time, he was able to ride the wave. He was able to ride the wave. But you have to remember, right? So 2008, he takes over. He takes over after a bad season by Brian Billick, right? A bad year by Brian Billick. That was a year after they was 13-3. So they come back the next year, draft Joe Flacco. The rest is history, right? 11-5, 9-7, 12-4, 12-4. Super Bowl at 10-6. Super Bowl at 10-6. Then the rest of it plays out as we've already discussed it playing out with the Flacco Lamar Jackson situation. But the 10-6 was when you started seeing after that Super Bowl, and now all of those people that were there for that last ride of that dynasty that was that Baltimore Ravens team, after they all started leaving, that's kind of when things started deteriorating for John Harbaugh until Lamar Jackson showed up. Until Lamar Jackson got them back to that level, right? It was a defensive team when he took it over, and they rode the defense. It was an offensive team once he handed it over to Lamar Jackson, and he's been riding out the offense as the defense has gotten worse and worse. Less and less consistent, less healthy. So I say all that to say, I know that he is respected. I really like John Harbaugh. He actually did a thing for a book I co-authored years ago about why we love football. You know, it was a thing that I did with Emory Hunt and Teron Davenport and Chris James and Brandon Howard. We all co-collaborated on this book, co-wrote it together. We had a lot of inspirational words. John Harbaugh was one of those people. You can't tell the story of football without Harbaugh. And he's a big part of that. He's a big part of that reason why you can't tell the story of football without Harbaugh. But it doesn't mean that I can't be objective and go, Harbaugh doesn't get this done in New York by himself. And this is all on him. But because if all of the reports are correct, our days of blaming Joe Shane for moves that happen, those are over. Apparently, Joe Shane's not going to have any hand in this. He's not going to be the person making the decisions. I believe this is a disaster waiting to happen. But, I will reserve rights, because as much as I believe that John Harbaugh is a good coach, I need to see what it looks like around him. Right? Is he bringing his OC with him? It looks like it. Right? It looks like it, and that's not bad. Have him give that Lamar Jackson playbook right to Jackson Dart, and have Jackson Dart be a Costco's version of Lamar Jackson, only with a legitimate, without a doubt, number one wide receiver, which Lamar never had. Zay Flowers, he ain't Malik Neighbors, right? Zay Flowers ain't Malik Neighbors. So, that'll be interesting. What do you do on defense? I was looking at some things at the defensive coordinator and some names that were bandied about. What do you do at offensive line? I'm under the belief you try to keep Carmen Brasillo, even if he's not a hardball guy. I believe you try to keep him. Why? Because this offensive line is who you have. And he has rapport with this offensive line, and scheme is scheme. But at the end of the day, power is power, zone is zone, trap is trap, right? So having the continuity in offensive line coach allows somebody to buffer terminology and language from the old offense to the new offense. Because for the offensive line, it's just a name. But what they do is not going to change. Slide protection, still slide protection. Big on big, it's still big on big. Turn back protection, sprint out, play actions. They're all the same. They just have different names. There might be different terminology used to describe them, right? So I'm under the belief you should try to keep Carmen Brasillo, because what I saw out of the Ravens offensive line for most of this Lamar Jackson run was inconsistency. You had an all-pro on the left side, so it was consistent over there. It's never really been consistent anywhere else. The right side has been a mess for years. Center stabilized because Tyler Lindenbaum was really good, but even he does some bonehead things, right? So, what does that look like? Do you bring in the Ravens guy, or do you stick with Carmen Brasillo and say, you know what? You take us forward. I like that. I think that'd be a great move. Defensively, right? Anthony Weaver is a name I hear a lot, the Miami Dolphins DC. He seems to be the runaway favorite. Worked under Harbaugh, 21 to 23 as the D-line coach, as the assistant head coach. You don't see D-line coaches a lot of time end up being defensive coordinators, but I'm here for it. I'm messing with it. My question is, though, how do you make this offensive line, this defensive line, make up for the back end, right? So now that then becomes, who's going to be your defensive backs coach that gets it done at a level to make the back end match the front end? Because the talent is in the front end. The talent is in the front line. The talent's not in the back end, right? Not to the highest of levels anyway. Jim Leonard, he's the Broncos assistant head coach, and he's the pass game coordinator, right? Leonard played for Harbaugh, but we got to remember, when Leonard played for Harbaugh, it wasn't like he played for Harbaugh as Harbaugh's a defensive mind. He just played for the Ravens, and Harbaugh was the head coach. That's it. So we don't have to sit and act as if he learned at the foot of Harbaugh, but he's with the Broncos, and he's the pass game coordinator, right? What has he been doing? Defensive coordinator at Wisconsin in college. Is he ready for the jump up to DC? If so, we at least know that he has secondary experience, right? Secondary experience. So that's interesting. Charlie Bullen, who is the defensive coordinator when they finally decided to let go of the former defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen. It's not that I don't like Charlie Bullen. It's just that when I looked at his defense, it wasn't enough for me to go, oh my God, I want to see that guy run it back. Sorry, Charlie Bullen. There's no way if I'm, even though these head coaches' jobs are like, guaranteed money. If I'm John Harbaugh, I want the opportunity to see a second contract. I don't see a second contract if Charlie Bullen's my DC. Sorry, Charlie Bullen. Go do that somewhere else. Like, you can't tell me that the outside linebackers coach, right? Because that was his job. He was like the outside linebackers coach. You can't tell me that he unlocked Abdul Carter once he became the defensive coordinator when he's had the opportunity to unlock Abdul Carter all season. Abdul Carter didn't play a new position when Charlie Bullen came along. He also, right, for what it's worth, wasn't playing a different position. He had the same position and he had the same opportunity since Kayvon Thibodeau had been out, who had been out for many weeks before Shane Bowen was fired, when Charlie Bullen was still the outside linebackers coach. You can't give him credit for Abdul Carter in the last 5 games of the season and not give him blame for Abdul Carter for the first 16 or whatever it is. You know what I'm talking about, right? The first 13 games of the season. That doesn't make any sense. So get out of here with that. Denard Wilson, the Titans DC. I've heard his name be bannered about. Wouldn't be a bad job because he's a defensive backs coach. He should be able to come in and clean things up in the secondary, which needs to have heavy emphasis. How do we allow this secondary to be better, right? How do we allow the secondary to be better so that the front line can be all that it's supposed to be? Antonio Pierce. I love Antonio Pierce. This is not his time. For him to come into a coaching staff where he doesn't have any experience with the head coach, I almost feel as if it would make him too easy of a scapegoat if for some reason the defense doesn't get right. I want this all on the head of John Harbaugh. I want this all on the head of John Harbaugh. I don't want anyone else to be able to take credit and or blame but John Harbaugh. If they get it popping, give John Harbaugh all the credit. If they don't get it popping, if this is bad, then guess what? Blame John Harbaugh. Right? The GM's no longer in the way. The ownership group is dealing with what they're dealing with. This is the road for Harbaugh to do the things that he always probably wanted to do in Baltimore, but never had the authority to do. I'm giving him all the blame because I'm going to give him all the credit. Who else? Joe Cullen, the D-line coach of the Chiefs, another guy who came around with John Harbaugh, has some coordinated experience, but now Zach Orr is a guy who is with the Ravens, but he's entrenched in the Ravens. He's a rising defensive star, though. Might be somebody worth trying to pry away from Baltimore if you can. All of those are interesting candidates, right? Interesting names. And here's why they have to be interesting. Because John Harbaugh doesn't possess the ability to improve anything from a schematic level. The only thing John Harbaugh can improve is how things are done. And if we're being honest, right? If we're being honest, Are you guys really going to be out here telling me or trying to get me to convince or trying to convince me, that Brian Dable was just running like letting the inmates run the asylum and that's why things were bad? Right? Can we just admit that there were some unlucky things with injuries that hampered Brian Dable? And on top of that, he made the wrong decision in defensive coordinator. When he let his ego get in the way, he made the wrong decision in defensive coordinator that cost him his job. That's what it is. We don't have to make it seem as if he was a horrible leader of men. That's just not the case. It's not the case. Remember, after the 2024 season, I wanted Brian Dable fired. I wanted him and Joe Shane gone at the same time. I think they had earned it. They gave him another year, but they only gave Brian Dable part of the year. And the reason why you only give Brian Dable part of the year is because you don't want him to get it around so that it looks like the New Orleans Saints looked. I'm sorry. I can say it because it's over now. If they would have given Brian Dable the entire year, he would have won more games at the end of the season than Mike Kafka won. Because Mike Kafka's not a great head coach. And he's just an okay coordinator. That's why we haven't heard Mike Kafka's name being bantered about for any gigs. Will he land somewhere? Of course. What he'll land as, I have no clue. But he ain't him. We're going to talk more about Brian Dable in the future, because if he lands where I think he has a chance to land, oh boy, business is absolutely picked up around here in the NFC East. I'm happy for you guys that y'all are excited because Harbaugh is a respected leader. He's one of probably the best CEO head coaches. If you ask me to rank the CEO head coaches, it would be Mike Tomlin, then it would be Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, right? As the CEO head coaches. Those would be the two for me. So you getting one of the two best CEO head coaches in the game, juice to you, like awesome to you. I also want to just remind you that Harbaugh's not a spring chicken. That John Harbaugh is 63 years old. And age has a funny way of jumping on you quick in this business when all the pressure is now on you. Because this isn't him, hey, the pressure's on whoever the incumbents are. Nope. He's made sure that everything that's going to go on in this situation is on him. We'll see how he responds. I think you got competent, really, really competent leadership. I hope he makes great decisions with his offensive and defensive hires, because that's going to make the difference. I think the offensive one, kind of a no-brainer. That's why we haven't talked a lot about it. But the defensive one is going to be critical to the success of this team. And I hope he makes the right choice. Because if he doesn't, we're going to see it pretty quickly. There were some other names that I thought would be better names for this job because they do specialize in one thing or another. And so now you only have to find the answer on the opposite side of them. John Harbaugh has to find the answer on both sides. I just think it's a lot tougher that way. But he has the latitude. He has the money. They've paid him $100 million, which means they're not going to be in a rush to get him out of here soon so that they have to pay him $20 million a year to not coach. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your guy. He's here for the long term. He's here for the foreseeable future. How do you feel about it? What makes you nervous? It's going to be a great offseason discussing how he puts together this staff and what this team is going to look like in 2026. It all starts right now. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time I have. New York Giants on that side. Make sure you go over there, check out everything that we're doing over there, check out all the stuff that I've done. It's a lot, right? There's going to be a lot more in this month. And then there's going to be a lot more because this time of year is when I crank out the content. So until next time, I'm Coach Gene Clemons, and I have a giant issue.